where we are already working to develop resources, provide training, and support both Jewish students and the institutions themselves from vitriolic anti-Israel sentiment. Within the UN and its agencies, where the calls for war crimes charges against Israel will be as automatic as they are baseless. In combating the BDS campaign and movement that seeks to delegitimize and isolate Israel from within the international community. And on the issue of Iran, which continues to represent an existential threat to Israel and a source of instability throughout the region and beyond. And then there's that oldest and ugliest of hatreds, the scourge of anti-Semitism, which has reasserted itself with breathtaking and frightening intensity. This crisis has, once and for all, disabused the world of the notion that somehow one can distinguish between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. For over the last month, the war against the Jewish state has fused with the war against the Jewish people. And that too represents a challenge we must confront. All of these issues will require everyone's direct involvement in order for us to achieve meaningful and constructive results. And I hope you'll stand with us just as you have until now. But friends, allow me to offer one final observation, one that comes from the benefit and privilege of having been involved in the work of the community my entire adult life. We cannot succumb to the temptation, however seductive, of responding to these challenges with our hearts leading our heads. God knows the lies, the distortions, the mendacity, the skewing of facts advanced by our adversaries almost screams out for a forceful response. But our objective is not to outshout, to outspend, or outpunch our adversaries. Our goal is to win the confidence and support of the majority who claim no attachment to either side, to help them connect the dots. We can't afford to do that which offers us only momentary emotional satisfaction. We must demonstrate the kind of discipline that allows doing good to trump feeling good. That kind of strategic thinking has yielded the results we observe in the political sector, with media and beyond. And with the benefit of true unity that has been our salvation over these last 2 months, and the strength it imparts to us all, we will overcome all of these challenges and see both the people of Israel and the land of Israel at peace. Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you, Shimon. We are grateful for all your efforts on behalf of the Jewish people and the State of Israel. Yesterday, I received an update on the situation in Israel, and it was entitled Operation Defense Edge by the Numbers. And I think you've heard some of them from the ambassador, but I'm going to give you a few more. 29 days of operation. Hamas and Islamic Jihad launched 3,356 rockets at Israel. A total of 4,762 targets in Gaza were struck by the IDF during the course of the war. 64 IDF soldiers and officers were killed, as well as 3 civilians. 32 terror tunnels were unearthed and destroyed in the ground offensive. 82,201 reservists were called up for service. Approximately 1,800 Palestinians were killed, including 900 Hamas terrorists. 1,491 trucks of food went into Gaza from Israel, including 220 trucks with humanitarian aid and 106 trucks carrying medical equipment. Operation Protective Edge, by the numbers, is a helpful glimpse into the massive scope of the operation and the tremendous suffering endured by the Israeli and Palestinian people at the hands of Hamas terrorists. But tonight, we want to focus on individuals and personalize the trauma of families in Israel. Manya Greenberg and Jennifer Loom-Genscher just returned last week from a 10-day trip to Israel organized by the Jewish Women's Renaissance Project under the auspices of JET. With the leadership of Lauren Chaps, Manya and Jennifer were part of a 13-member delegation who left the safe confines of Ottawa at the height of the conflict in Israel and have agreed to share stories of some of the victims. Please join me in thanking Manya and Jennifer for their solidarity and welcoming them to the podium.
Major Benaya Sorel fell on Friday in a clash with terrorists in southern Gaza. Sorel, 26, a resident of Kiryat Arba, was to be married in a few weeks to his fiancée, Gali. He is survived by his parents and 7 brothers and sisters. You were the pride of life of every Jewish mother, said Sorel's mother. You were wise, happy, unique, smart, brave, and a hero. You always knew what you wanted and where you were going. All of the different people who came to mourn with us on Friday reminded us who you are. There was no one you met who you did not touch, and especially Gali, who we also love so much, and I promise you we will take care of her, just as you requested of us. His mother continued on to tell of the last conversation she had with her son shortly before he died. In this war, we spoke relatively frequently. At 8:30 in the morning, an hour before the horrible terrorist put an end to your life, I spoke with you. You said, "I'm just going to complete a small mission and then I can leave, so please turn on the coffee maker." Immediately after the conversation, I thought, what will happen? Even though you always seem to be so immune to death, if you die, will I ever be happy again? I have no way to try and explain my pain, said his fiancée, Gali, in a trembling voice. The night before you left, we had a long, upbeat conversation. You said the next day there would be a ceasefire and you'd be able to call. You promised that you would watch over yourself and all of your soldiers. I texted you at exactly 9:30, and I wrote that I hope you're feeling better and how much I love you, but I don't know if you saw it.
Dror Henin. Dror Henin, 37, a father of 3, was the first Israeli casualty of Operation Protective Edge when he was killed by Hamas mortar fire as he was on another volunteer mission to bring food to soldiers on the Gazan border. He had organized food packages and small gifts for soldiers made by children, but did not have a chance to conclude his mission. Hanin was described by all who knew him as someone who was ready to volunteer and help whenever and wherever necessary. His brother described him as a person who was everywhere all the time. It's hard to define Dror, he told the IDF radio. Dror was everywhere. He would offer help even if he wasn't required. That's the way he was. He was constantly looking to do good. If you would ask him, "What can I do for you?" he would reply, "No, what can I do for you?" Dror was an active firefighter for the past 3 years, involved in several life-saving operations. Avi Naim, the head of Beit Area Council, where Hanin lived, said, that Dror was a special person, guided by values. He met his death tragically while doing what he most loved, the love of his fellow man through unending giving.
Major Amos Greenberg, 45, served in the Reserve Corps. He was killed on Saturday, July 19th, during an attempted terror attack by Hamas gunmen. He volunteered to perform his reserve duty, as he had already aged out of mandatory service. Amos is survived by 3 children, ages 7, 12, and 15. His son's last words to his father at his funeral included, "Once you only seemed like Superman, now you are Superman." He lived with his family in Hod HaSharon. Sagit Greenberg shared that her husband was dedicated to protecting his soldiers and understood that the line of duty could involve risking his life. "We talked on Friday night and he said, 'Don't worry, everything is terrific,'" she recounted. "Then Saturday, he didn't answer my calls," she added. "Suddenly, I do not have a husband. I do not have the father of our children. I do not have my love. I do not have my best friend," she said. Amos was a man with tremendous personal power, with values, with respect, with appreciation, she said. He was the most giving father in the world. He was always so humble. He died Saturday while trying to protect IDF soldiers stationed near Gaza. Hamas terrorists opened fire on Greenberg's unit after infiltrating Israel via a terror tunnel while attempting to abduct Israeli soldiers or citizens.
Thank you, Jennifer and Manya. We had asked Ottawa Jewish Bulletin columnist Jason Moskowitz to say a few words this evening, and he initially agreed. However, he left for Israel on Monday, but he did leave us a powerful audio recording of his thoughts, and we are pleased to have Jason's daughter, Simone Moskowitz, here to introduce the recordings. Simone?
Thank you. Just before we hear my father's message, I wanted to say a few words, both as a very proud member of this community and a proud member of the Golden extended family who has lost a son and a brother over the weekend. I first met Hadar Golden when we traveled to Israel last summer for my sister Emmanuel's wedding. She had married Chemi, Hadar's brother. Hadar was a radiant human being, as my father will describe. He really stood out, as does the Golden family. Their message of strength and unity led 15,000 people to attend Hadar's funeral. I have Israeli friends in New York whose parents attended the funeral, who had no prior connection to the family. My sister Hannah told me that she had met one man who also didn't know the family but had come all the way from France to be there. And the tragic circumstances surrounding the loss of Hadar really captured the hearts and minds of Israelis and Jews around the world. And that's a reflection of the Golden's ability to go beyond their excruciating pain and share it in a way that is meaningful for all of us. Their desire to bring people together, which was originally meant to accompany Hadar to his final rest, actually resulted in bringing comfort to a lot of people in these very difficult times. And I think that is proof that Hadar's spirit is at work. And I can tell you that the Goldens are very comforted to know that we're here thinking of them and thinking of Hadar together. And with those words, I will leave you with my father's message. Merci.
Good evening to members of the Ottawa Jewish community. If I had one wish in this whole wide world, it would be that I wasn't speaking to you tonight and that none of you would be here listening. Unfortunately, we find ourselves here in this place, and it is up to each and every one of us to leave stronger. Why am I speaking? I am here because I was asked by the community to be here, asked to help bring the war in Israel a little closer and more personal for all of us. With 2 daughters living in Israel, with the instincts of a journalist that never left me, I can tell you these days I never put my iPad down and I never stopped reading about the war. Last Thursday night before going to sleep, I read about the 72-hour ceasefire. I got up at 7 a.m. and from bed turned my iPad back on to see if the ceasefire held. 2 Israeli soldiers dead, 1 kidnapped is what I read. My heart sank, and then I read on. On the BBC site, I read a story about the kidnapped soldier, Hadar Golden. Hadar Golden, my daughter's brother-in-law. I have been around words all my life, but it took up until that moment to fully understand the meaning of the word surreal. When his death was confirmed on Saturday night, I was numb, thinking of all those who suffer such great personal loss in Israel. Hadar Golden's grandparents survived Hitler's Europe and went to Israel. His 2 grandfathers fought in the War of Independence in 1948. Hadar's parents, Simcha and Leah, are 2 of the proudest Israelis I ever met. Deeply religious, committed Zionists, they are true believers and backers of the importance of Israel, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Simcha has a PhD in Jewish history. He teaches at University of Tel Aviv. Leah has a PhD in computer science. She is a software engineer and also teaches. Simcha has had one basic message for the family since last Friday: be strong. Leah and Simcha had 4 extremely talented and beautiful children, a daughter, Ayelet, my son-in-law, Chemi, and twin sons, Sur and Hadar. The twins, 23 years old, were both young officers in the army. They were both fighting in Gaza at the same time. Sur was permitted to leave last Friday to be with his family. I met Hadar a little over a year ago at all the activities which revolved around my daughter Emmanuel's wedding. Filled with exuberance, religious conviction, strength of character, intelligence, and loads of good looks, I can still see him dance on the dance floor, dancing his heart out. I can still see him davening with all his inner soul. He and his twin brother looked to the army as a way of serving Israel for the long term. That explains they being such young officers. They were not in the army because they had to be, they wanted to be. Hadar was engaged and had a wedding planned for September. I could go on about the family. There is so much more to say. But if I may, I would like to conclude by stepping away from the Golden family to look at a much wider picture. I began by saying I have recently been reading a lot about the war, Israel, and the Middle East. Yet of everything I read, there is one article that spoke to me more than any other. It talked about the recent Air Malaysian in-flight murder of 298 people over Ukraine and Israel, and what the 2 had in common. The article talked about a Ukraine that had cities that once included Jewish population centers of 100,000, 150,000, and even 200,000. But most of those people were murdered by the Nazis, and the article reminded us how Israel of today is largely made up of the ancestors of those very few survivors. Survivors and pioneers, just like Lieutenant Hadar Golden's courageous grandparents. The main point of the article I read is that today's jihadist Islamist movements want to get rid of all the Jews all over again. That is why we're here tonight, to be together. And just like the Golden family, just like Israel, we need to be strong together. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon and Jason. Simon, we would be grateful if you conveyed our deepest sympathies to the extended Golden family, and thanks to you and to Jason for taking the time to share Hadar's story with us. Tonight is about mourning, and it is about making a difference. I would now like to invite Jewish Federation President and CEO Andrea Friedman to say a few words about how each of us can be involved and make a difference.
June 12th changed the landscape of the summer of 2014 dramatically and forever. The kidnapping of Eyal Yifrach, Naftali Frankel, and Gilad Sha'ar, and the subsequent grim discovery of the bodies of these three teenagers marked the beginning of a period of tremendous anxiety and sorrow that has only deepened with the tragic loss of 64 soldiers, 3 Israeli civilians, and mounting Palestinian casualties. We mourn the loss of all of Hamas's victims and are puzzled by the world's reaction to it. It is confounding that so many refuse to believe that for Hamas, every civilian casualty, Israeli and Palestinian alike, is a public relations victory. The past 7 weeks have been agonizing, terrifying, and humbling. Raw emotions have made us all yearn for opportunities to gather together and invoke in all of us a strong desire to make a difference. And so tonight, even as we mourn the devastating loss of Israeli lives, let us take steps to empower ourselves and translate our grief into strategic, united, and positive action. Firstly, please consider visiting Israel. There is a solidarity mission organized by the Jewish Federations of North America departing on August 17th for 4 days of Jewish unity and learning. There are also exciting and important opportunities for travel next May through our Federation's community mission and through Dragon Boat Israel. Secondly, one of the most powerful and effective ways for community members to advocate on behalf of Israel is to engage with local media. Engage in media outreach by monitoring and by acting, to correct the record, to write letters to the editor, make the case, and challenge distortions. Thirdly, engage politically. For example, there are an overwhelming number of anti-Israel voices flooding the offices of the 6 members of parliament who recently participated in Siege's mission to Israel. We need to be heard, to push back, and we must do so en masse in order to have an impact. Elected officials, such as Minister Baird and Mr. Garneau, who both spoke out so eloquently and in unequivocal terms about Israel's legitimate right to defend herself at our last rally, must also hear praise from us, as do the Premier of British Columbia and the recently resigned President of the Green Party. They need to hear from constituents that their principled stands are appreciated, and we need to acknowledge the unwavering international leadership shown by our Canadian government. Fourthly, the most effective advocates for Israel combine passion with knowledge. Stay informed by getting on Siege's mailing list to receive updates and talking points on key issues. Take the time to participate in Israel programs, be they political or cultural. For example, tomorrow evening, there's a concert of Israeli scouts right here at 7 p.m. And this weekend, there's an Israeli beer featured at the Craft Beer Festival. Participate, and then share your experience with others so that you can add a non-political dimension to the conversation and narrative that takes place about Israel. Finally, if you have not already done so, please do consider a gift to the Jewish Federation of Ottawa's Israel Crisis Fund. Thanks to the generosity of Ottawans just like you, we've already raised just over $170,000. Israelis all over the country have experienced unprecedented trauma from the unrelenting missile attacks and the loss of so many soldiers. Thankfully, throughout these trying times, Canadian Jewish federations are meeting the needs of those most affected by working with our partners to support the growing list of vulnerable populations. We are making sure that each and every generous donor dollar is used strategically and to the optimal benefit of suffering Israelis. There's much more that needs to be done, but this is a good place to start. The abduction of Naftali, Gilad, and Eyal on June 12th forever changed how we'll remember the summer of 2014. Too many families have suffered unimaginable loss, and their lives will never be the same or whole again. Now it is up to each of us in this room to mourn, but to remain strong and unified, to be sad, angry, grief-stricken, and even frustrated, but to translate these feelings into positive actions. We need you, And more importantly, Israel needs you. So thank you, and Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you, Andrea. As our program nears conclusion, I would like to invite Rabbi Reuven Belka of Congregation Maziki Adas to say a few words and to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Stephen. In your seats, you have a paper which has 3 tefillot. One of them is the tefillah for Shalom HaMedina, for the tranquility, for the state of Israel. On the other side, you have a tefillah for the IDF. And finally, Psalm 121. For the tefillah for Shalom HaMedina and for the IDF, I will ask you to please rise.